Hey, everybody, welcome to Jen Lowry Writes. Today I have such a blessed treat for everyone. Guys, guess who's with me today? I've got Laura Amy Schlitz with me. She is the author of the Newbery Medal winning Good Masters, Sweet Ladies, Voices from a Medieval Village, the Newbery Honor Book, and New York Times bestseller Splendors and Glooms, the Hired Girl, recipient of the Scott Odell Award for Historical Fiction and the National Jewish Book Award, and several other books for young readers, including The Night Fairy, which I absolutely love. A teacher as well as a writer, Laura lives in Maryland. Laura, welcome to the show. I just want to hug you through the screen. And so, because I can't hug you, I'm going to hug your book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It appreciates that.
I know it does. I feel so honored to be able to have this conversation with you today because your books are just so moving. The words that you give are like gifts.
Thank you.
They're gifts. So you've got to tell me a little bit about that gift of writing. You have a sense of storytelling that just captures the heart. Where could you say that comes from?
Well, in an oral sense, I've been telling stories for a long time now. I work at the Park School and I'm the librarian, and I tell 3 stories a week. I've been telling 3 stories a week for 30 years. So there is something about having children look at you. And, like when somebody's mean or unjust in a story, they're horrified, and they're satisfied when something is beautiful, and they're satisfied when it comes out right. You can see the relief and you can see all the stuff that's going through their heads because children just give themselves to a story in a way that not all adults can, but they can. And you can also see when you're losing them. You can also see when there are too many words on the page. I don't read my books aloud to them because it would take a while. It would hijack the curriculum. But I think actually telling stories orally and watching the faces of children has given me a little bit of a leg up on being a storyteller.
But you can see the lean in. You can see the lean.
Yeah.
You can see it. And so when I'm reading your book, I'm leaning in because it's that same feel as if you are right there weaving this magical story. And it takes you in. Switching POVs is just seamless. It's all woven together just so beautifully. It's just so, when I think about the research that you put into this book, how long was this book in the making?
Over 4 years. I don't like to say 5, but I mean, I researched the whole time. And it was a funny book because, Splendors and Glooms, I compare that to pulling a wet tissue through a coin slot. That was a killer of a book, and I never got more than like a quarter of an inch at a time. The Hired Girl was like watching a ball of yarn bounce across the floor. I just had to, get up and sort of bounce after. That was such an easy book. This one was strange because it would baffle me. It was like those puzzles that you sometimes find in craft stores that are like wood and bent pieces of metal, and you're supposed to fit and you can't do it. And then suddenly your hands do it and you don't know how it happened. And this was like that. This book would fight and baffle me completely, and then it would give. And I'd look at it like, oh, so it was a book that surprised me frequently when I worked on it.
That's lovely. There is a line in the book that stays with me, and I wrote it, nobody ever gets out of anything. And when I read that line, that mattered so much to me in my adult writing world at the moment. It's like it can apply to not only children, but it was like that spoke to me. And it's like you couldn't get out of this book. Like it was going to take you however many.
It's true. When you're writing on a book, don't you feel like you've sort of, well, to clean up a phrase from my grandfather, you've got your rear end shackled to the book. And I always sort of imagined the shackles around the rear end, sort of really holding you in place with the book.
Yeah. And even you were giving a speech, and I watched that one. It was online, it was on YouTube, and it was at the National Book Festival. And you were even talking, even in the way that you presented yourself, it was such a story. And you talked about the Minotaur, and you gave out Greek mythology in the middle of that speech. And you had that ball of yarn, and you talked about the friendships that are forged and how a friend helped you get to that August 15th date for that book. I love that. And I was thinking, I had this sense about you that you've always loved Greek mythology, or you've always loved that type of world, and you are pulled towards historical fiction, correct? Like, does that?
Yes, I am. I don't know why my imagination works that way, but it does. And yes, you're right. I've loved Greek mythology ever since, I think I was introduced to it in 8th grade, actually.
So has this kind of always been a secret gift that you've held in your heart? Like you knew you would always write or tell a story about Greek mythology? Had that always kind of been present with you?
No, but I did for a number of years want to write about Socrates. I wanted to write about him and this slave boy. And, I sort of finished The Hired Girl, and I didn't have anything to write. And I thought, well, it's a good idea to write that book about the slave boy. And I kind of couldn't get started. And in one of the books I read about the little bears who served the goddess Artemis, and I wanted to write about them, and then I thought, well, how can I put the little bears, because they were probably aristocratic Athenian girls, these girls that served the goddess Artemis as bears. And here's this slave boy, and girls and boys didn't mix, and slaves and aristocrats did not mix. And at that time, there was a conference in New York City, and Candlewick put me in the Library Hotel. Now, the Library Hotel has call numbers for all its rooms. So the first time I stayed in the Library Hotel, I stayed in oceanography. And, they've got Jacques Cousteau books on the bookcases and pictures of giant squids on the wall. And the second time I stayed in Islamic literature with beautiful calligraphy and poetry that I couldn't read on the shelves. Well, this time they put me in the paranormal room. And I thought, well, I could put these two characters together if one of them was a ghost.
Love that part. I love that.
So I was so thrilled to be in the paranormal room, because I hadn't thought of it before. And then suddenly there it was, that I could write about this girl and I could write about this boy, and they could meet because, after death, you don't necessarily have the same boundaries. You've got boundaries, but they're different.
I absolutely love how life experience could just hit you in some way. Something that seems normal to one person can hit a writer and open up and unlock that Pandora's box of creativity. And it can be all of this kind of thing. And then that one hope is there. That one spark is there. That is the coolest story. First, I want to go to that hotel. But I'm sure that my life would not allow me to go to that hotel right now. I got to put that hotel on my bucket list.
Oh, it's nice. They're very nice there too, and they have a writers conservatory, and so it's a good place to go.
That's a bucket list for me.
Who knows where you'll end up?
Who knows? That's the thing. Who knows that I would have ended up here talking to you.
Theological formations?
Yes, and just me being here talking to you opens up any possibility in the world of what God has out for me there. I could just see it all. So I just love it. And there's no telling what room I would get. I think I'd love that paranormal, but I would want to just leave it up to chance.
Yeah, there's a real charm. And, I think I had good ones, I mean, I could have been put in, the American Depression. That wouldn't have been a fun one.
But it was perfect for you. It was
It
the
was.
perfect. And I will tell you, speaking of fate, who would have thought washing your hair could lead and seal your fate? I mean, I just love some of your lines are magnificent. Your word choices are beautiful. When you wrote, okay, I can't give anything away. Start screaming now if I'm going to do a spoiler alert. But when you said, I am afraid of the dark. And then when you did that counter turn and that last line was, I am not afraid of the dark. Or so, I got to go find it.
And I can see in the dark. I
can see in the dark. I don't want to misquote you, but the last line was, and I'm afraid of the dark and I can see in the dark.
Yeah.
I just was like chills. I don't know. It was just like I was feeling that moment. And I was like, look how these words are just spider web spun. And once it all is there, you don't see the beauty of the web until then you step away from each section. And then it all comes like the beauty of the web. Because
it's interesting because I wrote these counter turn pieces with repeating certain syllable patterns all the way through. And I think that when people read them, even though they're not aware of it, there's some kind of symmetry that plays with their mind, or at least that's how I feel when I read them, that you're not aware that line 12 has 6 syllables and then line 12 of the second thing has 6 syllables, but somewhere there's a part of our brain that just appreciates pattern. And I think that that's part of what that technique of the Greeks, that strophe antistrophe, did, was it appealed to the sense of pattern and repetition.
And what you just said is how I basically thought in my head about how the spider web was being formed. Like when you would, each line, you would draw it out. Then when you walk away and look back, you see the pattern, you see the beauty, you see the intricacy, and see the importance of each line. Because when you first read, you read the line, you read for meaning. You hear the pattern, you hear the heartbeat of the sound. Then when you walk away, you see the beauty of it all.
Well, also when you're trying to copy these syllable patterns, what ended up happening was somehow you get the two different climaxes at the same place, because of the nature of language. And of course, if I were better at it, you'd see that even more, because I was able to keep the syllable counts the same, but I couldn't always keep the rhythms the same. And I didn't always want to. But anyway, we're probably confusing people who are listening.
No, that just means you need to go and get this book on March 9th so you can see everything we're saying. So for me, setting up the exhibit pieces. So I've read books before, and then there would be like a free teacher resource guide that would go along. Like it would have, you could flip through and you could do some supplemental curriculum pieces. Or someone would actually, they would offer it free to people, to readers, or they would make you pay for like a companion novel, to go along with the work, the main body of work. The way that you've structured this, you have it all intertwined. So you have, 18 exhibits in here, plus you have the storytelling, plus you have the verse. You've got so much wealth of information that not only students can move through and just absorb, but teachers can also capitalize on and take excerpts. You know how you said you probably couldn't do the whole entire thing, but as teachers, we look for model text. we look for places that we could pull from to show examples of a technique, to show additional resources. And you've got it all beautifully packaged. So did you have that in your mind to begin with? Did you see it all playing out like that with the exhibits and just the different variety?
I knew from the beginning I kind of wanted to use images, and in fact, in the beginning, sometimes I was writing these newspaper articles about how a new artifact had been discovered and what the archaeologists were saying, and I ended up cutting this. This book was written almost by process of elimination. I just tried stuff and kind of messed with stuff, and some of it I threw out. I threw out a lot because there were things that I was just trying and they didn't work. But
So
I
did
did
you do
want
that
to
in your,
use,
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I did know that I wanted to have some visual stuff, and I was interested because we look at artifacts from the past and we make reasonable assumptions about them. And so you see a beautiful doll that must have cost money and you say this was for a much beloved child, but not necessarily. It may have been given in an entirely different context. So I was sort of playing with that too. And then, you'd think about an artifact, and then, like, they showed me horse bits in the National Archaeological Museum in Greece. When I traveled there, we had these wonderful guides, and they found out I was interested in horses and how horses were being treated. And they took care that I saw the bits. And I also thought, this is what this kid is going through. I mean, he's got a sharp bit in his mouth. He's being trained with all of these hardships. So the artifact stimulates your imagination at the same time and helps you think thematically.
Oh, that's beautiful how you use that to help you with that next, I do love the horse piece in there. And I like how you talk about the reality, like it's a tough reality. And sometimes when we look at children's literature, people may get the misunderstanding that everything has to be beautiful and rose-colored glasses. No, you respect children, and you can tell that with the work that you do because you respect them to be able to handle that type of life and what it could have looked like. And let's get real here. Like, he's shoveling poo, but he's not having a friendship, a companion. He's not, he's alone. He's not being able to speak unless spoken to. His world is just turned upside down. And then he sees the beauty in that. And he sees the work and how to create that type of beauty in his own craft. And I love that. I love that life that you gave him. Because then that hard work that he put into that, it shows that the first time you draw a horse or the first time you do anything, the first time you ride a bike, the first time you write a story, it's going to look a little messy and the legs aren't going to work right. And you're not going to have that natural flow. And then he says, how could you draw water on skin? How can someone do that? And it's like, you think of an artist and he's like, it's got to be a god. It can't be a human.
Yeah.
And you take away that for a child to understand, like when they see, well, that person that wrote this book, they can't be a human. They have to be this superpower, otherworldly, creative person. And you say, no, it takes work. It takes the everyday, and it takes that love of that thing. And I got that with just his experience, just with the horse and with the painting, that you want it so much. You find ways to get that thing, whatever that thing is, that creative spark, that thing, you find ways to make it work. And so that was inspiring to me as an author when I read that, because it reminded me that we all start messy.
Yeah.
We start messy. And so when you were writing and then you were discovering and then the book was pulling you in these directions. When did you edit? Do you write a little bit, then edit after you finish? How's your process when you're writing? Because you said you cut a lot of things. Was that with an editor?
No,
That
no,
was with you. That was
no, that was
you
me. And
deciding.
that was just, it was, I wrote a lot of, garbage. And I didn't have a sense of how this was going to structure. I just kept sort of trying things and then taking things that I sort of liked and kind of quilting them together, because I didn't know how to write this book, both because it's a strange book, but also one of the terrible things about writing, and I'm sure you've noticed this, is that writing one book does not teach you how to write another book. You have to start all over again. It's maddening. I make bread, and if somebody says, okay, make whole wheat bread, I'm like, okay, I can change the whole wheat. I can, but a book, it has its own rules, and you have to figure out what universe you're in. I don't know if that's answered your question or
It
not.
is, but isn't that the joy of the ride?
Well, it can be. It can be. Yeah. And this was a book that had its definite pleasures. Because there were those moments when the puzzle would yield to my hands and I was like, look at that. I don't know how that happened.
So the thing is thinking back of all the places where you cut. How hard was that? Because some people say it's so hard to cut the babies. It's so hard to cut the words and get rid of them. Like, did you just say, nah, this has got to go. This doesn't work.
Now you have to understand, what I cut was really bad. What I cut was like the quality of bad where I wouldn't want someone to break into my house and see it. The kind of bad where, I worry about dying before I can get those pieces into the recycling.
But you wrote them.
I do have trouble cutting sometimes because I overwrite. I always overwrite. That's just, and then I have to pull back, and I'm always aware of that. And I'm always, I finish writing and I look at the word count. I think, well, can I get another 100 out of there? And, I'm still a wordy writer. I just am. Although, as I must say, as Hermie says, this looks like such a substantial book, but a lot of it is verse, and verse just eats paper.
Yeah.
Especially as it goes on, it's more and more verse. So it's really not that long, but it is thick and substantial in a really, I think, a very luscious way. Beautiful book. Look how
it is a lovely way. Yes.
And I love these illustrations. I love that she puts the horse and the bear on the cover because they're kind of animating spirits for these two children. And I just love that they're there. I feel like she really understood what was at stake, as well as knew how to make the cover spectacularly beautiful.
And it is. And the work is beautiful.
Thank you.
And, you say, I like what you said about each book having its own way. You would think you would know, but I love your career because you have not set yourself in a boundary that says, I'm here. You say, the story's here, I'll go with it. Because I love knowing that you wrote the monologues.
Yeah.
And I messaged my theater teacher, who I absolutely adore. And I messaged her and I said, look who I'm getting ready to meet. And I made a joke to her. I'm like, this could be your next project with all of your free time when you're not auditioning and you could do high school monologues. And I hope I planted a seed there because she's beautiful and so absolutely talented that I sent her your book and I said, go, check it out. But now to see on YouTube children acting out your monologues.
Yeah.
Schools acting them out. There was a girl sitting in a forest on leaves, and this is my favorite monologue. As she opens it, she reads it. I know that has got to bring your hearts of joy.
Yes, it does. It does. And really, I mean, they are meant to be performed, and they're meant to be performed by children, because just the youth of children gives them a poignancy that they don't have on the page, I think.
So when you were tasked with writing the monologues, that came out of a natural experience. You wanted the children to have something to act
Yeah.
out.
And I volunteered for that. It's interesting because I did, when I was about 10, my parents took me to see Joyce Grenfell. She was a British monologist, and she was very fine. Um, and you can see bits of her on YouTube. Eng Lit is her, I think, her very best. But who knew that taking this kid to see a monologist when she was about 10 would lead her into this path, years later, where I said, well, I'll write some monologues, because I'd seen monologues. And then from that to be published by Candlewick. And then from that to get the gold sticker. So,
Like when you were first writing the monologues, did you have it in your mind, this is for the students that I'm surrounded with in my library? Or did you have it in your mind, this is something I want published for the world to have access to?
I wrote it for my students, and I had tried to get other things published, and I had failed. And I thought no one would publish those, because nobody goes into a bookstore and says, I'd like a book about the lives of medieval children told in the form of dramatic monologues. No, nobody wants that. You want a dinosaur book. But it was a very wonderful trick that was played on me. And people kept saying, you should try to get these published. And finally, after I think, 4 years, I said, I will prove to you that nobody will publish these. And I went alphabetically through a writer's guide, and I went, and I think Harper Collins, I got up to H. I started with Alfred Knox and, Candlewick and Chronicle, and, all the way up to, I think I did Green Willow, which pulped it, and Harper, and then Candlewick bid. They wrote back and they said, yeah, we like these. We want to do something with these.
Did you almost just fall out? Like, what was?
Yeah, I jumped up, I kicked my shoes off, and I ran up and down in the halls of my school. And the children saw me kind of soaring, leaping like Nijinsky. And, I am among the adults in their lives that tell them that they're not supposed to run in the hall because someone could get hurt. And so I was floating and wafting and, jumping through the halls, and they looked at me but I had to run it off. I was so excited.
I was running with you right there. I could feel the joy of you running down a hallway. And then did you have to say, you were right?
I left it for mystery. It's good for people to have some things to wonder about.
I love it. I love it so much. And then you have The Night Fairy for young readers.
Yeah, well, I wanted, there were so many little girls that would come to me because they wanted a book about a fairy, but they wanted the fairy to be the main character. And we didn't have very many. So I thought I'd write one.
And so it was a year ago, and I started working on a fairy book. And I was like, you know what? I need some research. I need to find a book. And I was having that similar problem, like the young girls in your library. But there was one book that kept coming up that was recommended, and it was by you. And it was The Night Fairy. And I was like, I got to read this book. I got to see what all this is about. And I absolutely loved The Night Fairy and did a book review on it. Just so in love. And I was like, guys, this book, every classroom, every family needs to have this on their shelf. This was such a story that I could see with my granddaughter one day in the far future, sitting and reading to her each night. Like, it's just a beautiful, and I was like, the vocabulary is perfect. It's spot on. Like, it's not too much. It's not too heavy, but it matters.
Well, and Angela Barrett's illustrations and
Oh,
Tina made that book a beautiful gem.
yes,
I think a lot of people buy that book because it looks like a special gift for a special child.
it is. It's splendid. It's
Thank you.
just a splendid book. And so you move from all of these different ages that you have within your world of writing. Do you chase story, or does story just chase you? And how does that relationship work?
I don't know. I do know, I mean, I'll be eager to see who's going to read this. I don't know what age is going to read this yet. You know,
So I will tell you,
with
I
The
work.
Night Fairy, I thought, I had a definite age in mind, which was second grade. And it's been read by older children and younger children, but it had this, I just never, I don't know yet who this reader is, but I had to write the story. And I joke around sometimes and I say, well, if you get an idea and you turn it away because you think it's not marketable enough, or it's not important enough, or it's not, then maybe the other ideas won't come. They'll say, oh, I had a friend who went to her house and, oh, she was turned away. So, you sort of have to take what comes.
I
And
love it.
this, was a strange book. And I about this one, I like to say it went to a lot of other writers first. But they said, well, no, that sounds weird. And so it finally came to me, and I wasn't its first choice.
But you were its right choice. It
Well,
was fated for you because you were the perfect one to write this story. It was meant for you all along. That's how I look at it. And I see it for early middle grade. I see it for definitely for middle grade, but I also see it for high school students because, believe it or not, you think, well, Percy Jackson is not being talked about in today. Yeah, like, that's been a while back. Oh no, students are still saying Percy Jackson's one of my favorite books and one of my favorite series. And I mean, this was something I just asked last month to my ninth graders. What is the last book that you remember reading and falling in love with?
yeah,
Not one that it was required reading,
but
not one.
one that gave you that, that I don't want to put it down. I completely love this feeling.
And Percy Jackson will continue to come up. And so I know that students are then going, well, do you have a copy of that Percy Jackson book? Can I stop by? And I'm like, yes, I do. I actually have them on my shelf. Come by when we get back to school. We start back tomorrow from being in virtual since last March. But we come back tomorrow, and I told my students, wait till you see the bookcase in my office. Wait till you see. And when the library doesn't have it, you have to put it on hold. I'll get it. You can get it off my shelf, or I'll find it and I'll gift it to you. You tell me what it is you want. And it's Percy Jackson. And so I do believe that even high schoolers that are in love with mythology would love this book. They would adore it, and they would like the structure, because we do have the Kwame Alexanders who are writing in prose and verse, and we have, Jason Reynolds doing it, and we have Other Words for Home. Like, we do have books that we champion at schools because it gives students the break away from the full set novel. It gives them an experience like none other. This is an experience like none other. And so I even see it in a perfect place for high school. And then, of course, I see it being read in teacher prep programs when people are working in children's literature and saying, what's the books that you need to know about? And to me, it's this right here, guys, Amber and Clay. And so I can see it across ages. So like you said, like, you don't quite know like the exact perfect spot. I think there is just a universe for it.
Good.
Maybe not
Let
one
me
location. I believe that it can spread. I believe that this story has the power to spread across age groups and be appropriate for all age groups, which is fascinating how you did such a lovely book in that way. Because yes, the Night Fairy, I could see a second grade student running down that hallway after checking out the Night Fairy. I could see that for a young reader. And it fits perfectly, second, third grade, the Night Fairy. But when I look at Amber and Clay, I look at it being this book that can transform the grade level criteria. It can move, and then it can move with the student. And when they would read it again, they would experience it in a new way because then they've built their own experiences. And this would be a great reread for them as they move through their life. Like that's just my take. My take.
Well, I like your take very much.
I do too. I will say that for me, the research process, like your bibliography, extensive in the back of this book. Love your author notes. Really, it shows that you truly care about what you do.
Yeah, I really do. And I mean, well, the bookcase that you can see in this room, that was completely filled with new Greek books because I had to read more Greek books. And it's a very pretty bookcase. It's got a little Greek key around it, which made me feel that I really did have to buy it. But I did a lot of research because there was so much I didn't know. And, specific things, Thracian tattoos, donkey's feet, and there I was looking up again. But it did give me a sense of world. And at first, and I had this experience the first time I read the Iliad. It just was I had such culture shock because the Iliad is so strange to a woman of the 21st century. And I couldn't see things the way the original audience did at all. And it was only on the third reading of the Iliad that it really started this is great stuff. This is amazing stuff. So there was culture shock with entering that Greek world too, which was such a violent world. These people had hard lives and they didn't have really any security. I mean, there's constant warfare. It's almost no wonder that they fetishized these beautiful young men that were soldiers, because these beautiful men stood between you and enslavement and death, which, yes, they saw them as noble and beautiful beings. But it was a rough world, but they created such beauty in it. And I think my enslaved boy Raskos is like that. He sees the world. He sees the beauty in a horse, and it's amazing that he can, but he does. And even though his life is hard, he's a creator.
He has been gifted with that. He's been gifted with that ability to create through a God's gift too. And I love that as well, introducing the different personalities of the gods. Like we read the Odyssey every year in ninth grade still. And we see the enthusiasm of students when they'll say, "Oh, wait, I know Zeus, and I know Hermes, he's got the flying shoes," right? And then once we start talking about just the dynamics of that world and that culture, they're like, "Okay, that's a lot more than just flying shoes and a thunderbolt. Let's look further." So that's where also your book is an excellent teaching tool, because you do go through that extensively, and you can tell that research just patterns and matches just so perfectly within how you tell your story. So I just want to thank you for just following after the story as it presented itself to you. And
Well,
just,
thank you for all these lovely things you've said.
no, it's beautiful. I absolutely love your work. And I just feel so blessed that I've had this opportunity to sit with you today and just share in your process and get to know you and your colorful life. Look at the colors. Okay, everybody, I know a lot of you listen to the podcast. I know you guys are love the audio version of the podcast, but this is recorded and it's going to be on YouTube, and you get to see beautiful colors and a beautiful smile and a heart and just a passion for story right here. And I feel like I'm sitting in that living room with you and just,
Can I play show and tell since we are
yes,
here? Okay,
please.
so
I would love it.
this is also a story for discouraged writers, which is all writers, because we live
Yes.
in perpetual frustration and discouragement. Um, I sent the early manuscript of this to a friend, and he was someone that I knew really liked my work. And he wrote me back and he said he thought it was kind of bleak and monochromatic. And he said that thing that people say when they really want you to stop writing a book. He said, put it in a drawer for a couple of years and think it over. And I didn't want to put it in a drawer. I was actually in despair. And it was also a time when I had some problems with money because, that big sewer pipe that comes out of your house and goes all the way to the sidewalk, well, that needed to be replaced. So here I had this book that I didn't want to give up on, but it was not working. And the person that someone who I really trusted had told me that it was no good. And there was an exhibition of bronzes in Washington, D.C. Now, you don't get that many chances to see the Greek bronzes. There aren't that many that have survived. So I thought, well, I have to go see the Greek bronzes because, how often, if I did write this book, I'd need to have seen the Greek bronzes. So I went and looked at them. Of course, they're just amazing and alive. And afterwards, I sort of walked through the gift shop because, there might be a book I needed there. And there was a bracelet that I needed. And I didn't want to buy the bracelet because I didn't have money for a bracelet. It wasn't like super expensive bracelet, but, it was, and there was that sewer pipe. But I kept thinking about the bracelet, and I did order the bracelet, and I have never worn the bracelet. I'll tell you why. You won't be able to see very well, but there are 3 seals, and 2 of them are Pegasus flying up into the sky. And one of them is maybe Andromeda because she's being carried off by a sea monster. And I bought this, and it was a commitment to myself that I was going to write the Greek book. And I told myself I would never wear this bracelet until the day came when I had to sign the Greek book. And I thought to myself that the Pegasus is one side of creation, where you soar up among the clouds and, there's light and there's wind and there's all this openness. But Andromeda, she's being taken underwater where she might drown by a sea monster. And it's not exactly her idea of how she planned to spend the day. And that also is the process of creation. So I bought this, which I couldn't afford, as a signal to myself that I was going to write this Greek book. And when things got really bad with the Greek book, I would put on the magic bracelet. And I would sit here and I would type with the magic bracelet on. It never failed me if I was desperate. And I didn't wear it all the time. I didn't wear it because then the magic would run out. And I'm not sure how much is still in here. But if I was really desperate and I just couldn't work through, I would go and put on the magic bracelet, which was my commitment to this book, and had sea monsters and winged horses on it, and I would sit there and I would type away. And I am hoping that sometime soon I will have a pile of books to sign and I can wear the magic bracelet. And who knows, I might even be able to wear it socially sometime.
Yes, I love that. And it
Okay, here we
motivated
go.
you. Okay, you ready? I have it moved. This is not a magic trick. I have a motivator. Are you ready?
Yeah.
It never leaves. It never leaves my side when I'm writing. It's
Good.
always here. Nobody ever knows.
Well, also, it
And
is
it is
a bear,
fair
and
in
bears,
pajamas that my husband got to me for our first Valentine together. We've been together 6 years now, and he got me this, and I know that I got it tucked down here every time I write, and it's a reminder of not only the love of my family now, because my son wants to be a wildlife biologist and study bears,
oh,
but it's about my grandchild one day getting an opportunity to have my story that I wrote for them. One day, sitting at this desk with this teddy bear stuck right here, and it's a motivator to me. I feel like we all need those motivators in those times of that, that I'm afraid of the dark,
yeah,
because the writer can be just like Lycos and say, but I'm afraid of the dark. And then we have either someone to come in and help inspire us, or we inspire ourselves and we pray and we say, but I know someone who can see in the dark. And that is when we let our stories shine. That is when we let our stories out. And so I love your bracelet. I love that that was that motivator for you. I cannot wait to know that when you get your stack and you're ready and you're signing and it's going out, you're going to have on that magic bracelet. I love it. So, guys, don't give up hope. Continue to chase after stories and let stories chase after you. I want to thank you so much, Miss Laura, for
thank
being
you.
here. I just want to again hug you, hugging the book. March the 9th is coming. Look at her pretty hardback. Look,
Beautiful. It's got
look.
it's got orange end paper. If you undress it, it's got red foil against this kind of saffron color, which is very appropriate because of the saffron dyed robes of the girls at Frauenheim.
And just the illustrations and the art and the design and all of the beauty of this book.
Yeah, this is a gorgeous book.
It is a gift, guys. It is a gift that I would truly encourage you to give to yourself as a writer so you can experience the craft of beauty and words in the making. Look at that. But it's also a gift to give to someone that you love, and you want them to experience the beauty of story. There's no greater gift that you can give a child than a book. Love in a book, of course. But when you give them that book, you're allowing them to escape whatever it is in their world into some other world. And this is a world that you can introduce to any child, and they would love it. Love it. So thank you so much, guys. We are signing off. I just want to say how amazing this opportunity has been. And I hope that we can stay in touch. And guys, I will check you guys out later.